The relay station had been silent for 3 hours before anyone noticed. That wasn't unusual. Out on the edge of mapped space, silence was the default state of things. Signals came rarely, and when they did, they were often delayed, distorted, or meaningless. Technician Arlen Voss had spent 11 years listening to nothing in particular. He had grown used to it. At 13:07 station time, he marked the silence as a routine lapse. At 13:09, he stopped writing. The console in front of him had updated. Not with a signal. With a timestamp. Arlen leaned forward slightly, frowning. The timestamp blinked once, then stabilized. 2 hours 16 minutes and 44 seconds. 300 years ago. He stared at it. Then he checked the system clock. Then he checked it again. Glitch, he muttered, already reaching to reset the feed. Before his hand touched the panel, the screen changed again. A signal appeared. No, not appeared. Continued. The waveform wasn't forming from static or noise. It was already complete, as if the system had simply decided to show it now instead of earlier. Arlen's hand froze in midair. Okay, he whispered. He opened the signal analysis window. The system hesitated, something it never did, then began processing. Language, unknown structure, repeating origin, unresolved. Then the coordinates populated. Arlen felt something cold move through his chest. The signal wasn't coming from outside the system. It was coming from inside monitored space. From a region that had been empty for centuries. He zoomed in. Nothing. No stars. No stations. No debris fields. No recorded anomalies. Just empty coordinates. And a signal that had started 300 years ago and never stopped. The system chimed again. New data. Arlen didn't breathe as the display shifted from signal analysis to object tracking. Contacts detected. He blinked. The number read 1. Then 12. Then 48. The count didn't slow. It accelerated. Arlen's chair creaked as he leaned back, one hand gripping the edge of the console. Stop, he said quietly, as if the system might listen. It didn't. 112,340,900. The display flickered, not from error, but from overload. The counter expanded automatically to fit more digits. That had never happened before. Arlen swallowed. He had seen fleets before. Patrol groups. Trade convoys. Even military formations during border conflicts. Nothing like this. The number passed 2,000. And kept climbing. His training finally caught up with his shock. Arlen reached for the emergency channel. Then stopped. Because the system updated again. A new line appeared beneath the contact count. Not generated by his station. Not formatted in any known protocol. Just, written. We are resuming. Arlen stared at the words. A second line appeared. Stand by for account reconciliation. His hand hovered over the emergency switch. This time, he didn't hesitate. He slammed it. And for the first time in 11 years, the edge of known space wasn't silent anymore. The emergency channel reached the council in under 12 seconds. That alone told Delegate Rethan Paur this was not routine. Emergency signals from outer monitoring stations were filtered, verified, delayed, and often ignored entirely if they didn't meet escalation thresholds. The system existed to prevent panic. This signal bypassed all of it. Priority override. Direct relay. No delay. That had not happened in 31 years. Paur was already standing by the time the chamber doors opened. Around him, representatives of a dozen species shifted in their seats, some irritated at the interruption, others curious. The council chamber itself remained what it had always been, functional, neutral, deliberately unremarkable. A place designed to make decisions feel smaller than the consequences they carried. Display, Paur said. The central projection activated. For a moment, there was nothing unusual. A standard star map. Trade routes. Boundary markers. Known systems. Then the overlay appeared. A line. Clean. Straight. Impossible. It began far beyond the mapped edge, deep in the region labeled simply as unobserved dark, and extended inward across multiple sectors. It did not curve around gravitational wells. It did not adjust for known hazards. It did not follow established transit paths. It moved as if none of those things mattered. As if space itself was not a limitation. Origin? Poe asked. The analyst hesitated. That hesitation changed the room. Unconfirmed, she said carefully. The signal predates our records. A low murmur spread across the chamber. Poe didn't look away from the display. Contacts? He asked. Another pause. Then, we stopped counting at 3,800. Silence. Even the species that didn't share a common language understood numbers like that. 3,800 vessels was not a fleet. It was an event. Poe folded his hands behind his back. Composition. Unknown. Energy signatures. Inconsistent with known drives. Communication. The analyst swallowed slightly. No response. At the far side of the chamber, Chancellor Virek of the Dominion leaned forward. Have they been hailed? Yes, Chancellor. In all standard frequencies. Yes. Legacy protocols. Yes. Mathematical broadcasts. Yes. And? The analyst met his gaze. Nothing. Virek leaned back slowly, his expression tightening just slightly. Then they are either incapable or unwilling. Poe finally turned. Or, he said calmly, they are not interested in us. That shifted the room again. Explain, Virek said. Poe gestured to the trajectory line. They are not searching. They are not exploring. They are not adjusting course. He stepped closer to the projection. They are going somewhere specific. The analyst adjusted the display. The line extended forward. Its endpoint resolved. A small system appeared. Unremarkable. Low population. Minimal strategic value. No active conflicts. Designation: Valaris Minor Cluster. A few delegates frowned, trying to recall anything relevant about it. Most couldn't. Poe could. Valaris, he said quietly. A minor species. Agricultural focus. Medical exports. Politically insignificant. A system that survived by not being noticed. Why? Someone asked. No one answered. Because there was no logical reason. Which made it worse. The projection shifted again. Real-time update. The fleet had advanced. Closer now. Still perfectly aligned. Still silent. Still, ignoring everything. Speed. Virek demanded. The analyst's voice dropped. Constant. How constant? She hesitated again. Then. It has not varied by even a fractional margin since detection. That wasn't possible. Not across that distance. Not through that density of space. Poe felt something settle into place in his mind. Not understanding. Something colder. They are not traveling, he said. The room stilled. They are arriving. No one spoke. Because everyone in that chamber understood the difference. The system chimed again. Incoming update. Not from the fleet. From the outer station. Arlen Station. Text only. Unformatted. Untranslate. It appeared across the main display exactly as it had been received. We have maintained the record. A second line followed. Deviation has been noted. The chamber did not react immediately. Not because they didn't understand. But because they did. Poe stared at the words. Then at the trajectory. Then at the system waiting at the end of that line. Valaris. A place no one important thought about. A place no one powerful needed. A place that had done nothing. Or so everyone believed. Prepare an intercept, Virek said sharply. Standard response group. We will establish identity and intent before they reach inner space. Poe didn't look at him. They already have intent, he said. Virek's jaw tightened. And you know this how? Poe watched the fleet marker advance. Perfectly steady. Perfectly certain. Then he spoke quietly. Because they announced it before we even knew they were here. The words lingered in the chamber. Heavy. Uncomfortable. And for the first time, not a single delegate reached for protocol. Because something had just become clear to all of them. This was not first contact. This was not an invasion. This was something else. Something older. Something patient. And whatever it was, it had come back on purpose. The intercept fleet launched within the hour. It was not the Council's full strength. That, in itself, was intentional. 40 vessels, fast, heavily armed, and unmistakably authoritative, slid out of dock in tight formation, their hulls reflecting the chamber's artificial light before vanishing into the dark between systems. A standard show of force. Enough to demand identification. Enough to end uncertainty. Or so the protocol said. Delegate Paul watched their departure from the secondary display, arms folded behind his back, his posture unchanged. ETA? Someone asked. 6 hours to intercept point, the analyst replied. 6 hours. For the first time since the emergency signal, the chamber settled into something resembling patience. Questions filled the space where answers should have been. What do they want? Why Valaris? Why now? Why announce themselves at all? No one responded. Because every answer required assumptions. And there was nothing to build assumptions on. No known species matched the profile. No historical record suggested anything like this. No intelligence network had reported even a rumor. It was as if the fleet had not entered the galaxy, but reappeared. Paul remained silent. Because there was one question no one had asked out loud yet. Not directly. Not completely. He asked it anyway. Who are they? The words didn't echo. They settled. Uncomfortable. Incomplete. The analyst checked her console again, as if the answer might have appeared in the last few seconds. Unknown. Virek exhaled sharply. That is not an answer. It is the only one we have. Then find another. We are trying. The conversation fractured after that. Different species began pulling from their own data networks. Private channels opened. Silent communications flickered across personal devices. Everyone was searching. No one was finding anything. The main display updated. The unknown fleet had advanced again. Still perfectly aligned. Still ignoring all hails. Still not accelerating. Not decelerating. Just continuing. Paul studied the formation more closely. There was no randomness to it. No clustering. No inefficiency. Every ship occupied a position that made sense only if the entire formation had been designed as a single system. Like a structure. Or a mechanism. They're not a fleet, he said quietly. No one responded at first. Then, what? Paul didn't look away from the display. Fleets adapt. They respond. They shift formation based on conditions. He gestured slightly. They haven't adjusted once. The analyst zoomed in. The spacing between ships was exact. Mathematically precise. Unchanging. They're holding formation across light minutes of distance, she said. That's not coordination. Paul nodded once. That's intention. The room fell quiet again. Because intention implied something worse than hostility. It implied certainty. The system chimed. Intercept fleet update. All eyes shifted. The 40 council ships had reached the designated corridor, a narrow band of stable space between two dense asteroid fields. A perfect choke point. A place where anything moving through would have to slow. Would have to acknowledge. Would have to react. Opening communication, the comm officer said. Signal transmitted. Standard greeting. No response. Repeating on all channels. Signal transmitted. No response. Switching to legacy protocols. Nothing. Mathematical pulses followed. Then harmonic sequences. Then visual encoding bursts. Every known method of contact. Nothing. They're within visual range now, the analyst reported. Any change in velocity? No. Course. No. Formation. No. The intercept commander's voice came through, steady and controlled. Unknown fleet continues approach. No response to hails. No visible weapon systems. No deviation in trajectory. Hold position, Virek ordered. Force them to respond. The intercept ships adjusted, forming a barrier across the corridor. 40 vessels. Immovable. Undeniable. A line drawn in space. The unknown fleet did not slow. Paul felt something shift again. Deeper this time. They're not stopping, he said. Of course they are, Virek snapped. They have no choice. Paul didn't answer. Because the display was already updating. Distance closing. No deceleration. No hesitation. No change. They will collide, someone said. But the tone of it was wrong. Not fear. Not urgency. Confusion. Because collisions required 2 participants. And this didn't feel like that. Command, do you want us to engage? The intercept leader asked. Virek hesitated. Only for a moment. Yes. Disable if necessary. Do not escalate beyond. The signal cut. Not distorted. Not jammed. Not interrupted by static or interference. It simply ended. Cleanly. Completely. As if it had never been there. The display froze. Then updated. 40 ships. Gone. No debris. No energy spike. No weapon discharge. No escape signatures. No distress calls. Nothing. The corridor remained exactly as it had been seconds before. Empty. Except for the approaching fleet. Which had not slowed. Had not changed. Had not acknowledged what had just happened. The chamber didn't react immediately. Not because they were calm. But because there was nothing to react to. No event. No evidence. No explanation. Just absence. Report, Virek demanded. Silence. Report. The analyst's voice came back thin. There is nothing to report. That's impossible. I know. Paul stared at the blank space where the intercept fleet had been. Then at the advancing formation beyond it. Then at the words still lingering on the secondary display. Deviation has been noted. He understood something then. Not everything. Not even most things. But enough. They didn't destroy them, he said quietly. No one asked how he knew. Because they already felt it too. What did they do? Someone whispered. Paul didn't answer. Because the better question was the one he had asked before. And now it carried weight. And fear. And something far worse than both. He looked at the display. At the fleet that moved like it had always been moving. At the silence it carried with it. And he asked again. This time, no one tried to answer. Who are they? The chamber did not erupt. There was no shouting. No panic. Only silence. Not the calm silence of control. The kind that comes when something has happened that no one present has a framework to understand. Delegate Paul remained still, eyes fixed on the empty corridor. 40 ships. Gone. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Not even displaced. Gone in a way that left no trace of their existence behind. Run it again, Virek said. The analyst didn't move. Run it again. She swallowed and rewound the sensor logs. The display flickered. The intercept fleet reappeared, 40 ships in formation, holding position, waiting. The timestamp rolled forward. The moment approached. Contact. Then. Nothing. No flash. No signal loss. No interference. The ships simply ceased to be. The playback ended. The room remained silent. Pause, Paul said. The analyst froze the frame. Overlay passive sensors. She did. Nothing. No, Paul said. Before. She adjusted the timeline. Seconds before the disappearance. Still nothing unusual. Energy levels stable. No distortion. No anomalies. After, he said. She moved forward. Empty space. Unchanged. Untouched. Paul exhaled slowly. They didn't destroy them, he repeated. Virek turned sharply. Then explain what happened. Paul didn't answer immediately, because the answer forming in his mind didn't fit into language comfortably. They removed them, he said finally. Removed them where? A pause. Paul looked at the display. Then at the logs. Then back at the words still present on the secondary feed. Deviation has been noted. He spoke quietly. From the record. The analyst frowned. That's not. Her voice stopped. Because her console had just updated. Without input. Without command. A system notification appeared. Archival sync in progress. That shouldn't be running, she said. I didn't initiate. The system continued. Lines of data scrolled rapidly. Cross-referencing. Re-indexing. Correcting. Stop it, Virek snapped. I'm trying, it's not responding. The sync completed. The system chimed. And then, the intercept fleet designation disappeared. Not from the live display. From the historical record. The analyst froze. What? She whispered. She pulled up the fleet registry. Nothing. No 7th response group. No deployment logs. No crew assignments. No construction records. 40 ships. Thousands of personnel. Gone. Not physically. Conceptually. As if they had never existed. That's impossible, someone said. The analyst's hands trembled slightly as she opened backup archives. Those two were empty. She checked external relays. Nothing. She checked personal logs. Nothing. The system had corrected itself. Removed inconsistency. Aligned reality with something else. Virek stepped forward. This is a malfunction. No one agreed. Because malfunctions didn't rewrite history. Paul spoke again. Quieter now. They didn't just remove the ships. He looked at the analyst. They removed the event. The room shifted again. This time, something colder moved through it. Understanding. Partial. Incomplete. But enough. They erased them, someone said. Paul shook his head slightly. No. He looked at the words on the screen. Then at the trajectory. Then at the fleet. They accounted for them. The system chimed again. Another update. Incoming transmission. Text only. Unformatted. It appeared across every display simultaneously. Unauthorized obstruction resolved. A second line followed. Record integrity maintained. No one spoke. Because the implication was immediate. And absolute. The intercept fleet had not been attacked. It had been corrected. The display shifted again. The unknown fleet had reached the corridor. It passed through the exact coordinates where the intercept ships had been. No change. No reaction. No acknowledgement. It was as if nothing had ever stood in its way. Which, according to every system now available, was true. Paul felt the weight of it settle. Not fear. Not yet. Something else. Something deeper. They're not responding to us, he said. They're not interacting with us. Virek's voice was tight. They just removed 40 warships from existence. Paul nodded once. Yes. And you think that isn't interaction? Paul finally turned to face him. No, he said. This is accounting. The word hung in the air. Uncomfortable. Precise. Virek's expression hardened. That is not a concept recognized by any military doctrine. It isn't military, Paul said. The room went still again. Because that made it worse. Much worse. The analyst spoke, voice quieter now. They're approaching Valaris. Time to arrival updated. Hours. Not days. Not weeks. Hours. The system expanded the projection. Valaris minor cluster appeared again. Small. Quiet. Unimportant. Waiting. Paul stared at it. At the end point of the trajectory. At the place this thing had chosen. They're not searching, he said. They're not negotiating. They're not even acknowledging us. He paused. then said the thing no one wanted to say. They're continuing. The implication settled across the chamber like gravity. Unavoidable. Heavy. Virek looked at the display. Then at the erased logs. Then at the message still visible. Record integrity maintained. His voice dropped. What record? No one answered. Because no one knew. But for the first time since the signal appeared, the question had changed. It was no longer, who are they? It was, what have we already done? Across the galaxy, systems updated. Archives shifted. Tiny inconsistencies corrected themselves. Records aligned. Histories adjusted. No alarms triggered. No warnings issued. Just quiet synchronization. As if something had been watching for a very long time. Waiting. And had now decided to begin balancing the account. The Valaris Ministry of Civic Records had not been full in decades. It was not abandoned. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that came after a long period of being important, followed by an even longer period of being overlooked. Elder Marin sat at her terminal near the window, hands resting lightly on the worn surface of the desk. She had worked in this building for 56 years. Long enough to remember when the halls had been crowded. Long enough to remember when decisions made here had mattered. Long enough to remember before. The alert came through without sound. Just text. No priority flag. No escalation. No urgency. Unidentified fleet approaching system boundary. Marin read it once. Then again. Then she leaned back slightly in her chair and looked out the window. The city beyond was unchanged. Low structures. Soft light. Slow movement. Valaris had never been a place of urgency. That had been taken from them. A long time ago. She returned her attention to the screen. The data updated. Contact count, increasing. Trajectory, fixed. Origin, unknown. She should have called someone. There were protocols. There were procedures. There were still, technically, authorities. She did none of those things. Instead, she opened a different file. An old one. Not indexed properly. Not fully digitized. A partial archive. 3 centuries old. Her fingers hesitated slightly before selecting it. Then she opened it. Harbor intake record. Year 0. The image that appeared was grainy. Incomplete. Captured on early recording systems that had never been intended to last this long. A flat expanse of land. No water. No structures. Just open ground. And ships. Broken ships. Damaged beyond recognition. Some barely holding shape. Some collapsed entirely. They covered the horizon. Marin had seen this recording many times. But she still watched it the same way. Quietly. Carefully. As if something inside it might change if she looked closely enough. The next file loaded. Text overlay. Species, human number of individuals. 40,247 condition. Critical status, seeking sanctuary. Marin closed her eyes briefly. She had not been alive then. But her grandmother had. And her grandmother had told her everything. Not as history. As memory. They arrived without warning, her grandmother had said. They didn't ask for permission. They just stopped. The ships had been failing. Life support systems collapsing. Hull integrity gone. They had not come as travelers. They had come as something else. Something at the edge of ending. The Valaris response had not been strategic. There had been no council vote. No cost analysis. No projection models. There had simply been people going out onto that flat land, carrying what they could. Food, water, medical supplies, and blankets. Marin reached beside her desk. Slowly, carefully, she opened a small compartment. Inside, wrapped in a thin protective layer, was a piece of fabric. Old. Faded. Worn at the edges. She lifted it gently. A blanket. Not Valaris make. Human. Her grandmother had carried it once. For 6 months, she had walked from the ministry to the harbor every morning. Carrying blankets. Knowing they would not be enough. Knowing nothing would be enough. But carrying them anyway. They didn't speak our language, her grandmother had said. But they understood warmth. Marin ran her fingers lightly across the fabric. There was a mark near the corner. Faint. Almost gone. A symbol. She had never known what it meant. Only that her grandmother had never washed it away. The screen updated again. The fleet had advanced. Closer now. Still silent. Still perfectly aligned. Marin watched the movement. And something stirred in her memory. Not her own. Something inherited. They stayed for 6 months, her grandmother had said. Long enough to live. Not long enough to recover. The next record loaded. Sanctuary granted. Duration. 6 months. After that, the ships had left. Repaired just enough. Stabilized just enough. 40,000 people boarding vessels that still should not have flown. They didn't say goodbye, her grandmother had told her. They didn't know how. They just left. Into the dark. Beyond mapped space. Beyond reach. Beyond relevance. The galaxy had moved on. Valaris had paid for it. Slowly. Quietly. Trade restrictions. Resource limits. Political pressure. Nothing dramatic. Nothing visible. Just reduction. Year after year. A civilization made smaller for choosing compassion at the wrong time. Marin had lived her entire life inside that smaller version. She had never questioned it. Because there had never been an alternative. Until now. The alert updated again. The fleet had reached the outer boundary. Then. Stopped. Exactly at the edge. Not 1 meter inside. Marin leaned forward slightly. The precision of it. That wasn't hesitation. That wasn't uncertainty. That was choice. The system chimed. Incoming transmission. Text only. Old Valaris dialect. So old the system struggled to translate. Marin didn't wait for it. She read it herself. Slowly. Carefully. The words felt unfamiliar in her mind. But she understood them. We have returned. Her hands tightened slightly around the blanket. A second line appeared. The account remains open. Marin closed her eyes. And for the first time since the alert had appeared, she understood. Not everything. Not the fleet. Not the power. Not what had happened in the dark. But this. This part was clear. They remembered, she whispered. Her grandmother had said something else, once. A long time ago. Something Marin had not understood then. They looked at us, she had said, like they were trying to memorize us. Marin opened her eyes. The fleet held position. Waiting. Not demanding. Not threatening. Just waiting. 300 years. And they had come back. To the exact place. At the exact boundary. In the exact language. Her fingers tightened slightly on the blanket. They didn't forget, she said softly. The system chimed again. A third line appeared. Please indicate where reconciliation should begin. Marin stared at the words. At the choice inside them. At the weight of it. 3 centuries of silence. Ending with a question. Not a demand. Not a threat. A question. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the blanket down. Then moved to the console. Slowly. Carefully. She switched input to manual. Old dialect. It took her a moment to remember the structure. Then she began to type. Each word deliberate. Each letter precise. A language no one had used in generations. Begin here. She sent it. Then sat back. Her hands resting in her lap. Still. Outside the window, the city remained unchanged. For now. But Marin knew something with absolute certainty. Something she had never known before. The 6 months her grandmother had walked to the harbor. Had not been forgotten. They had been recorded. Carried. Preserved. Across 300 years of darkness. And now. They had come back. To finish what had been left unfinished. The invitation did not come as a request. It came as coordinates. A single set. Precise. Already cleared through every security layer before anyone could question it. The message attached was simple. Representative presence required for clarification. No threats. No conditions. No urgency. Just expectation. The council argued for 12 minutes before agreeing. Not because they trusted the humans, but because they understood something fundamental. Refusal would not stop what was happening. It would only mean they would not understand it. Delegate Poor volunteered. No one objected. The shuttle was small. Deliberately so. Unarmed. Neutral. It crossed the distance between the council station and the human formation in silence. Poor stood near the viewing window, hands behind his back, watching. Numbers had not prepared him for this. The fleet extended in every direction. Not crowded. Not chaotic. Organized. Each ship positioned with intention. Like structures in a city. Or components in a system. He could not see the end of it. Delegate, his aide said quietly, we're approaching the designated vessel. Poor focused. The ship ahead was large. But not the largest. That detail unsettled him more than anything else. Power did not need to announce itself here. The shuttle docked. Smooth. Effortless. The airlock opened. A human waited on the other side. Young. Calm. Wearing a plain uniform with no visible insignia. Delegate Poor, she said. Not a question. Follow me. No ceremony. No tension. Just movement. The room she led him to was not what he expected. No command displays. No tactical projections. No visible control systems. A table. 2 chairs. Soft lighting. And something steaming gently on a side surface. Warm. Unfamiliar. But not unpleasant. Please, she said, gesturing. Poor Saturday. A moment later, another human entered. Older. Composed. Eyes steady in a way that suggested not confidence, but certainty. I am Admiral Sarah Val, she said. Poor inclined his head slightly. Delegate Poor. Galactic Council. She nodded once and sat across from him. Between them, she placed an object. Small. Physical. Unexpected. A book. Bound. Edges worn. Corners softened from use. It looked old. And somehow, more significant than everything outside the ship. Poor looked at it carefully. What is that? He asked. Val rested her hands lightly beside it. An accounting, she said. Of what? She met his gaze. Of everything. The room was quiet. Poor glanced at the book again. Then back at her. You recorded everything. Not everything, she said calmly. Everything that mattered. He considered that. And who decides what matters? She did not hesitate. The record. That was not an answer. Not a complete one. Poor leaned forward slightly. Explain. Val opened the book. The pages inside were dense. Structured. Columns. Entries. Symbols he did not recognize. But the pattern was clear. Order. Precision. Continuity. This, she said, is the first version. Poor frowned slightly. First. She nodded. The ledger has changed over time. Expanded. Improved. But this is where it began. She turned the page. The first entry. Highlighted. Marked differently from the others. This is Valaris, she said. Poor looked. He couldn't read the script. But he didn't need to. The structure told the story. A long column. Numbers increasing. Then stabilizing. Then expanding again. What am I looking at? He asked. Debt, she said. Poor's eyes shifted back to her. They gave you sanctuary. Yes. For 6 months. Yes. And you recorded that as debt. She shook her head slightly. No. She tapped the page. We recorded what it cost them. Poor paused. What do you mean? She turned another page. The entries continued. But now they changed. Different symbols. Different structure. These, she said, are the consequences. Trade losses, resource reductions, political pressure, economic damage, all recorded, all quantified, all connected. Paul felt something shift. You tracked what happened to them because of you. Yes. And you consider that your debt. Yes. The simplicity of it was unsettling. Paul sat back slightly. That is not how most civilizations define responsibility. Val's expression didn't change. We are not most civilizations. The room went quiet again. Paul looked back at the ledger, at the numbers, at the structure. And the rest? He asked. She turned several pages. Every species, she said. Every interaction. Every act of help. Every act of harm. Every decision. Recorded. Measured. Balanced. Paul felt a slow realization forming. You've been watching, he said. She shook her head. No. He frowned. You just described. We have been recording, she said. Watching implies distance. She met his gaze steadily. We were not distant. Paul didn't understand. Not fully. But he felt the weight of it. You're saying, he began slowly, you've been present. In ways you did not detect. The words landed quietly, but heavily. 300 years. Of observation. Of recording. Of accounting. Paul looked at the book again. Then around the room. Then back at her. This isn't just a record, he said. No. What is it? She closed the book gently. The ledger is not static, she said. It updates. How? She held his gaze. In real time. Paul felt something cold move through him. You're telling me, this thing is still active? Yes. Still recording? Yes. Still calculating? Yes. He exhaled slowly. And what happens when the calculation is complete? There was a pause. Not hesitation. Precision. Then she answered. The account is settled. Paul's voice was quieter now. And if it's not? She looked at him. Completely steady. Then it remains open. The implication settled into the room. Heavy. Unavoidable. Paul leaned back slightly. And the 40 ships, he asked. The ones that intercepted you. She didn't look surprised. We logged the interaction, she said. That's not what I asked. I know. Silence. Paul held her gaze. What happened to them? She considered him for a moment. Not deciding what to say. Deciding how much he was ready to understand. Then she spoke. They created an imbalance, she said. So you destroyed them? No. Then what? She tapped the ledger lightly. We corrected the entry. Paul felt that again. That disconnect. Between what she was saying. And what it meant. You removed them from existence. No. She shook her head. We removed the inconsistency. The room was very still. Paul looked at the ledger. At the worn edges. At the weight of it. At the idea behind it. 300 years. Of recording. Of measuring. Of remembering. And suddenly, he understood the most important part. You're not here for revenge, he said. No. You're not here for conquest. No. You're not even here for justice. She watched him carefully. Define justice, she said. Paul didn't answer. Because he realized. That wasn't the right word. He looked at the ledger one more time. Then back at her. And said it. Quietly. Clearly. You're here to balance. For the first time. She smiled. Just slightly. Yes. The first deliveries began before the council finished arguing about what to call them. No declaration. No announcement. No warning. Just, arrival. The Halan medical world did not understand what it had received at first. The package arrived through standard diplomatic channels. Small. Compressed. Encoded in a format their systems initially flagged as incompatible. Then reinterpreted. Then opened. And everything changed. Chief researcher Vesserin had spent 42 years working on 3 diseases that resisted every known treatment. 42 years of incremental progress. Partial solutions. Temporary stabilizations. Nothing complete. Nothing permanent. He was reviewing patient data when the system flagged a match. Not a similarity. A solution. Fully mapped. Fully tested. Fully resolved. He stared at it for a long time. Then checked the metadata. Date of completion. 30 years ago. Vesserin's hands were not steady as he opened the next file. And the next. And the next. Entire libraries of medical research. Centuries of work. Organized. Translated. Delivered without condition. His assistant stood beside him, reading over his shoulder. "Why?" she whispered. Vesserin didn't answer immediately. Because he remembered something. A story his grandmother had told him. A damaged vessel. 11 survivors. Brought into Halan space decades ago. Treated. Repaired. Sent on their way. No record. No significance. Just something that had been done. Because it was the right thing. He looked at the screen again. At the solutions. At the lives that would now continue. Then he said quietly, "Because we didn't forget them." His assistant shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "They didn't forget us." The Valnari did not receive a gift. They received a document. Sealed. Precise. Delivered by a single human envoy. No escort. No threat. No pressure. Just presence. The Valnari Border Council opened it in private. Inside. A ledger extract. 11 entries. Each one a life. Each one marked. Each one calculated. 103 years ago, a Valnari patrol had engaged an unidentified vessel in disputed space. 11 individuals had died. The official record called it a defensive action. The human ledger called it something else. Not accusation. Not judgment. Just record. Each entry detailed. Immediate loss. Projected future contribution. Impact across generations. Compounded value across time. The final number was not enormous. Not galaxy-shifting. Just exact. At the bottom. Settlement options available. The options were listed. Feasible. Proportional. Achievable. No humiliation. No excess. The council sat with the document for hours. No one argued. No one dismissed it. Because there was nothing to argue with. It was correct. One of the council members finally spoke. "Is it fair?" The question lingered. Then the eldest among them nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "That's the problem." They signed the agreement the next morning. The Dominion did not receive a message. At first. Their systems continued operating normally. Their fleets remained active. Their command structure intact. Then. Their home worlds stopped reporting. Not abruptly. Not violently. Quietly. As if someone had turned down the volume of reality. Monitoring stations showed the planets. Then. Didn't. In their place. Dispersed mass. Organized. Stable. Not destroyed. Not shattered. Reallocated. The population. Gone. No distress signals. No casualties. No emergency broadcasts. Nothing. 6 hours later, confirmation arrived. Every individual had been relocated. Entire planetary populations. Moved. Preserved. Placed elsewhere. Alive. Unharmed. The infrastructure. Removed. Every military installation. Every production facility. Every command center. Gone. Cleanly. Precisely. As if someone had looked at the system. And extracted the parts responsible for harm. Nothing more. Nothing less. The council chamber did not speak when the report came in. Because everyone understood what it meant. This was not punishment. Not in the way they understood it. This was settlement. The Dominion entry. Closed. Not every outcome was predictable. That was what unsettled the galaxy the most. A minor trade species, long considered neutral, received both a reward and a correction. Their entry showed decades of fair trade, balanced exchanges, consistent reliability. Then, a single moment, a decision, a refusal to assist a refugee vessel, not out of malice, out of inconvenience. The ledger recorded it, measured it, included it. Their settlement reflected both truths, positive and negative. When they reviewed it, their representative said quietly, "We thought that didn't matter." The human envoy responded simply, "It did." Within days, the pattern became clear. Species began receiving data packages, resource transfers, infrastructure support, settlement documents, each one tailored, each one precise, each one correct. No excess, no error, no deviation. The galaxy reacted. Some celebrated, quietly, carefully, as if afraid the gifts might disappear if acknowledged too loudly. Some panicked. Records were reviewed, histories examined, old decisions reconsidered. What had seemed insignificant now carried weight. Some tried to hide. Archives were altered, logs erased, evidence removed. It didn't matter. The next transmission they received was simple. Alterations have been noted. Nothing else. No threat. No consequence. Just inclusion. The message was clear. You cannot change the record. You can only add to it. Back on the human vessel, Paul sat in silence. The ledger rested on the table between him and Admiral Val. He had not touched it. He wasn't sure he was allowed to. Or if he wanted to. "This isn't enforcement," he said finally. "No," she replied. "This isn't governance. No. This isn't even power." She tilted her head slightly. "Define power." Paul didn't answer. Because he didn't have a definition that fit anymore. He looked at the ledger again. At the worn edges. At the accumulated weight of it. "This is inevitable," he said. Val nodded once. "Yes." The word settled. Heavy. Unavoidable. "Every species," Paul said slowly, "is in that book." "Yes." "Every action recorded." "Yes." "Every outcome, coming." "Yes." He exhaled. "And there's nothing we can do to stop it." She watched him calmly. "You misunderstand," she said. Paul looked up. "How?" She rested her hand lightly on the ledger. "The record is not fixed," she said. "It is ongoing." He frowned slightly. "That doesn't change what's already there." "No," she said. "But it changes what comes next." The implication hit him immediately. "You're saying new entries are added every day." Paul felt that shift again. Not fear. Something else. Responsibility. Choice. "Wait. The numbers change," he said quietly. "Yes." He sat back slowly. And for the first time since this began, he understood the true scale of it. Not the fleet. Not the power. Not the reach. The system. The logic. The inevitability. This was not something that happened once. This was something that would continue. Indefinitely. "Balance," he said. Val nodded. "Balance." Outside the ship, the fleet moved. Not aggressively. Not urgently. Just working. Delivering. Correcting. Completing. Across systems. Across species. Across history. Quietly. Patiently. Exactly. And for the first time, the galaxy began to understand. This was not an event. This was a process. The broadcast did not begin with an announcement. It simply appeared. Across every channel. Every frequency. Every system capable of receiving structured data. No priority override. No forced access. No intrusion. Just a signal. Available. Waiting. Public record access granted. At first, most systems ignored it. Because everything else about the last 6 weeks had already been overwhelming. Until someone opened it. Then everyone did. The interface was simple. Deliberately so. No complex navigation. No hidden layers. Just one function. Search. By species. By system. By event. By name. Every entry available. Every calculation visible. Every method explained. Nothing hidden. Nothing obscured. No interpretation. No narrative. Just record. On the council station, Paul opened it in his office. Alone. He hesitated only briefly. Then entered his own species designation. The results appeared instantly. A list. Not long. But not empty. He read. Carefully. Each entry was precise. Moments he recognized. Policies he had studied. Decisions he had once defended. Others he had quietly disagreed with. All there. Stripped of context. Stripped of justification. Presented as actions. And consequences. He reached the final number. Then sat back slowly. It was accurate. Uncomfortably so. Better than he had expected. Worse than he would have preferred. He exhaled. And realized something he hadn't expected. Relief. Because now, there was no uncertainty. Across the galaxy, the reaction spread in waves. Species with positive entries did not celebrate loudly. They received. Quietly. As if afraid acknowledgement might somehow invalidate the precision of what they had been given. Hospitals updated overnight. Energy systems stabilized. Collapsed infrastructures restored. No conditions. No contracts. No negotiation. Just delivery. And understanding. Species with negative entries responded differently. Some accepted immediately. Their proposals had already been prepared. Waiting. As if they had known this moment would come. Others hesitated. Not because they disagreed. But because agreement meant something difficult. Admission. Responsibility. The Velnari agreement was broadcast publicly. Not by the humans. By the Velnari themselves. A statement. Short. Clear. The account is accurate. We will settle it. That single sentence shifted everything. Because it proved something critical. The ledger was not being imposed. It was being recognized. Some species reacted with fear. Not of destruction. Of exposure. Histories long buried were now visible. Decisions once justified were now measurable. There was no rhetoric to hide behind. No reinterpretation. No narrative control. Just numbers. And they did what frightened systems always do. They tried to control the narrative. Public statements. Legal challenges. Declarations of illegitimacy. The responses came quickly. Not aggressive. Not dismissive. Just consistent. Methodology available for review. No argument. No defense. Just transparency. And the unsettling truth. The numbers held. A few tried something else. They altered records. Deleted archives. Rewrote history. Not completely. Just enough to shift perception. It didn't last long. Their next update came within hours. Record discrepancy detected. Correction applied. And the ledger updated. Publicly. Showing both versions. Original. Altered. The difference between them. There was no punishment. No consequence. Just exposure. Which, it turned out, was worse. On the council station, the emergency session lasted 3 hours. Not 11. 3. Because there was nothing left to debate. They all had the same information now. The same visibility. The same clarity. Paul stood before them. Not presenting. Not arguing. Just stating. The ledger is accurate, he said. No one disagreed. It is consistent, he continued. No one challenged it. It is fair. That word lingered. Uncomfortable. Unexpected. Because fairness had never been a stable concept at this scale. Until now. A representative spoke. What authority does it have? Paul answered without hesitation. The only one that matters. The chamber stilled. Reality, he said. Later, alone again, Poe searched something else. Not his species. Not a major power. A minor system. A forgotten one. He found it. A small entry. Decades old. A supply ship that had diverted course to assist an unidentified vessel. No record of it in council logs. No recognition. No reward. Until now. The ledger marked it. Positive. Modest. But present. Poe stared at it for a long time. Then leaned back. And understood something fundamental. Nothing had been too small. Nothing had been forgotten. Nothing had been lost. Everything had been recorded. Outside the station, the human fleet had changed position. No longer concentrated. Spread. Across trade routes. Between systems. In places no one had ever needed to monitor before. Not blocking. Not claiming. Just present. Integrated. As if they had always been part of the structure. As if the galaxy had simply not noticed them until now. Daru stepped beside Poe at the viewport. "Do you think this ends?" he asked. Poe watched the ships. Slow. Precise. Unhurried. "No," he said. "This isn't something that ends." Daru frowned slightly. "Then what is it?" Poe thought about the ledger. About the entries. About the updates. About the quiet, relentless precision of it. Then he answered. "It's something that continues." And across the galaxy, decisions changed. Quietly. Individually. Not because of fear. Not entirely. But because, for the first time, everyone knew. Everything mattered. The proposal remained unanswered. It had been sent 3 weeks ago. A formal invitation. Full council membership. Representation. Authority. Integration. Everything a rising power was expected to want. The response had been simple. Received. Logged. Under consideration. Nothing more. No urgency. No negotiation. Just patience. Delegate Poe stood at the viewport in his quarters, hands resting lightly behind his back. The station lights had dimmed to their evening cycle. Beyond the glass, the stars remained unchanged. But the space between them was not. Human vessels moved there now. Not in formation. Not in fleets. Distributed. Precise. Each one traveling with quiet certainty toward a destination only it seemed to know. They did not disrupt trade. They did not interfere with movement. They simply existed within the structure of the galaxy. As if they had always belonged there. Daru stood beside him. "Do you think they'll accept?" he asked. Poe didn't answer immediately. He watched one ship in particular. Large. Unhurried. Crossing a route no one had ever considered important before. "They don't need to," he said finally. Daru frowned. "Then why come back at all?" Poe's gaze didn't shift. "They never left." The words settled quietly between them. Not dramatic. Not absolute. Just true. Far away, on Valaris, Elder Marin stood at the window of the ministry building. The southern continent glowed faintly now. Terraforming lines moving slowly across land that had not supported growth in generations. Water flowed where it had once been rationed. Children walked past a newly built structure. Small, simple. A school. Above its entrance, in old script, a plaque read, "From those who were not forgotten." Marin touched the glass lightly, then closed her eyes. Not in grief. Not in relief. Something quieter. Something deeper. Completion. Across the galaxy. The ledger continued to update. Entries added. Values adjusted. Balances shifting. No announcements. No broadcasts. Just record. And on a small, nearly unnoticed page, a new section appeared. At the very end. Unlabeled. Unassigned. Still empty. For now. Somewhere in the dark between systems. A single human vessel paused. Just for a moment. As if acknowledging something unseen. Then continued forward. Because the account was not finished. It never would be. The first anomaly after the ledger release went unnoticed. Not because it was small. Because it didn't fit any known category. It appeared in a system with no strategic value. No recent conflict. No historical significance. A dim star. Unstable, but not dangerously so. The kind of place that stayed on monitoring lists out of habit, not concern. At 2:14 local system time, the star changed. Not its brightness. Not its position. Its history. The last 40 years of recorded fluctuation disappeared. Replaced with a perfectly stable pattern. Clean. Consistent. Impossible. The monitoring station flagged it. Then corrected itself. Anomaly resolved. No alert was sent. No escalation triggered. Because according to every system now available, there had never been an anomaly. 3 hours later, a secondary system noticed something else. A gap. Not in data. In cause. The star was stable. But there was no record of what had stabilized it. No intervention. No event. No process. Just, result. On the council station, Paul read the report in silence. Then read it again. Then accessed the ledger. He searched the system. It appeared immediately. A small entry. Recent. Precise. Instability corrected. No further explanation. No detail. No attribution. Just, completion. Paul leaned back slowly. And for the first time since this began, he felt something new. Not fear. Not uncertainty. Something, sharper. Delegate. Daru asked quietly. Paul didn't look away from the screen. They're not just recording anymore, he said. Daru frowned. They never were just recording. Paul shook his head slightly. No. He tapped the display. They're updating. The distinction settled into the room. Heavy. Unavoidable. The ledger was not only a record of what had happened. It was becoming a record of what should happen. Daru's voice dropped. That sounds like control. Paul didn't answer immediately. Because the thought had already formed. Fully. Clearly. Uncomfortably. No, he said finally. It's something worse. Daru looked at him. What? Paul closed the ledger slowly. Then looked out at the ships moving through the dark. Patient. Precise. Certain. Its correction. Far beyond mapped space. Past the routes. Past the systems. Past the places anyone was watching. Something else moved. Not human. Not recorded. Not yet. And for the first time. The ledger did not have an entry for it. But somewhere, deep within its structure, a new page began to form. Awaiting input. The first failure did not trigger an alarm. Because the system did not recognize it as a failure. On a remote observation relay, older than most active infrastructure, an automated process attempted to sync with the ledger. It was routine. Scheduled. Unremarkable. The request was sent. Acknowledged. Then. Returned. Entry not found. That response had never occurred before. Not once. Not for any query. Not for any system. Not in any recorded interaction since the ledger became accessible. The relay attempted again. Same result. Entry not found. The system escalated. Cross-referenced identifiers. Rebuilt the query. Adjusted parameters. Expanded search range. Nothing. No entry. No placeholder. No partial record. No pending update. It was as if the subject of the query did not exist. And yet, the sensor logs clearly showed that it did. The relay flagged the inconsistency. This time, an alert was sent. On the council station, the notification reached POR directly. Not through standard channels. Not through priority escalation. Through the same quiet pathway the ledger itself used. He read the report once. Then again. Then opened the ledger. Search input. Anomaly source coordinates. No result. For the first time since gaining access, the ledger returned nothing. Paul's hand stilled. That wasn't possible. Everything had an entry. Everything. That had been the foundation of it. The certainty. The inevitability. Run it again, Daru said. Paul did. Nothing. A third attempt. Expanded parameters. Historical sweep. Predictive indexing. Nothing. The silence of it was louder than any alarm. Daru spoke quietly. What does that mean? Paul didn't answer immediately, because the answer was worse than anything they had seen so far. It means, he said slowly, it hasn't been recorded. Daru frowned. That doesn't make sense. No, Paul agreed. It doesn't. He looked back at the relay data. At the object the system had detected. A shape. Not a ship. Not debris. Not energy. Something, structured. Moving. But not along any measurable vector. Then record it, Daru said. Paul didn't move. Didn't speak. Because he was already looking at the ledger. A new section had appeared. At the very end. Where the empty page had been. Not empty anymore. A single line. Subject pending. No details. No values. No history. Just presence. Paul felt something cold settle into place. Not fear. Something deeper. For 300 years. Humans had recorded everything. Measured everything. Balanced everything. And now. Something had appeared that did not fit. Did not align. Did not exist within the system. Daru's voice was barely above a whisper. What happens when something can't be accounted for? Paul closed the ledger slowly. Then looked out at the fleet. At the ships that had always seemed certain. Always controlled. Always ahead. For the first time. That certainty felt incomplete. They will try, he said. Daru swallowed. And if they can't? Paul didn't answer. Because the question had already moved beyond him. Beyond the council. Beyond the galaxy itself. Out there. In the space no one had ever needed to understand. Something unrecorded. Had just entered the system. And this time. No one knew what the balance would look like. The fleet did not move all at once. That would have been noticeable. Instead. Individual ships adjusted. Subtle. Precise. One here. Two there. A slow redistribution across the dark. Not toward systems. Not toward trade routes. Toward something else. Toward the coordinates of the anomaly. On the council station, no announcement was made. No emergency session called. Because there was no panic. Only observation. And something new. Uncertainty. Paul stood at the viewport again. The ledger open beside him. The final page no longer empty. Subject pending. No update. No expansion. No explanation. For the first time. The system was waiting. They've stopped updating, Daru said quietly. Paul nodded. They're observing. The distinction mattered. Before. The ledger had always been ahead. Now. It was catching up. Hours passed. Then days. Across the galaxy, nothing changed. No new entries. No new corrections. No new settlements. The process paused. That had never happened before. Then, the message came. Not public. Not broadcast. Sent only to the council. And to Paul. No header. No identification. Just text. We have encountered variants. Paul read it once. Then again. Then waited. The second line followed. Record incomplete. The words settled heavily. Because they meant something unprecedented. Not unknown. Not disputed. Incomplete. Daru spoke first. That's not possible. Paul didn't respond. Because for the first time. It was. Minutes later. A third line appeared. We are adjusting methodology. That was when Paul understood. Not fear. Not relief. Something deeper. They're changing, he said. Daru looked at him. The humans. Paul shook his head slowly. No. He looked at the ledger. At the system that had seemed absolute. Perfect. Final. The record. Far beyond mapped space. The anomaly moved. Not faster. Not slower. Just. Present. Human vessels surrounded it. Not attacking. Not engaging. Holding position. Observing. Learning. For the first time in 300 years. They did not act immediately. And that was the most important change of all. Back on Valaris. Elder Marin stood at the window once more. The land was alive now. Water moving. Crops growing. Children learning. The past. Returned. Balanced. Complete. She closed her eyes. And for the first time, she felt something different. Not closure. Not completion. Continuation. On the council station. The ledger updated. The final page changed. Not numbers. Not entries. A single line. Balance is not a constant. Paul read it. Then looked out at the stars. At the ships. At the unknown beyond them. For so long. Everything had been measured. Recorded. Settled. Now. Something new had entered the equation. Something that could not be predicted. Could not be calculated. And for the first time. That did not feel like a threat. It felt like possibility. Daru spoke quietly. What happens now? Paul watched the distant movement of the fleet. Slower. More careful. More human. They continue, he said. A pause. But differently. The stars remained still. The galaxy unchanged. And yet, everything had shifted. Because the ledger was no longer just a record. It was a choice. And for the first time, it was not being written alone. The end fire.